We did it. We're here. Game 7. The improbable actually happened, as Vince Scully once said. And it's your boys Alonso y Juan on After the Game here on Dodgers Beat. Juan, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good, buddy. I mean, not only did the Dodgers win, but we have the best thing in sports. We got a Game 7 tomorrow. Just like I predicted, this series was going 7. Never had a doubt that they were going to come back.
And we'll talk about the doubts that you did, in fact, have in a second. But in the interim, though, what a hell of an outing by Walker Beeler, fighting through all the adversity in the world there with the bases loaded, and he comes back. And again, for me, so far is looking as probably going to be the MVP of this series if the Dodgers advance. Mookie Betts going out there and saving, for sure, been at least a run that gets scored in there on that catch, which that's one of those those intangibles that Mookie brings to the table that you don't really think about is the little stuff of like that where he makes these preposterous catches. But the guy that I predicted was needing to have a big game today also comes out and helps out. JT going out there and working those at bats, obviously hitting that home run. All in all, a good game. But as much as we have to beat the dead horse, is Kenley Jansen back?
Well, look, again, I can't stress enough to you, he faced the bottom of the lineup. He's faced the 7, 8, and 9 hitters, or as you said, the 7, 8, and Pablo Sandoval, So, look, these are encouraging signs. This is now the 3rd clean inning he's had in this series. And guess what? Look, I'm not rooting against Kenley Jansen. We need Kenley Jansen if we're going to win the World Series. So, but he still makes me nervous. Like, is anyone going to feel good if Kenley Jansen's on the mound and he's facing Freddie Freeman and Ozuna? I don't know if Jansen's back, but it is encouraging. And it is something I think that you brought up, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, but we have to give that guy credit because he got buried. Like every Dodger fan, everyone in the media, articles were written that guy could not be thrown out in a safe situation. You couldn't put him back on the mound, and merely out of probably, necessity, he was on the mound in the 9th inning. But he went out there and he answered the call, and he deserves big ups for that.
Most guys, I feel like in that situation where they're being buried, not only by the media, but the fans, we're guilty of saying it on this show as well that there's no way you could put him out there. And you know what? At this point, he's going out there and doing everything he can to show us that we were all wrong. And all the credit in the world to him, because that would be, as Alana Rizzo said on Twitter a little bit ago, that'd be paralyzing for anyone. But for me, he's going out there and he's essentially, like I said last night, he's essentially having rehab starts in the NLCS to get it together and just adjust. And what on those outs, he was able to get 2 guys to pop out, and then he worked Pablo in a count and was able to get him going. All the props in the world to him. The other guy that's also stepped up huge is Pedro Baez. He had an outstanding outing tonight. It was great to see him just kind of working both sides of the plate. He's definitely getting a little faster getting to the plate now. But this is the Pedro Baez that we all know that they want to use in high leverage situations. And again, what was that voice in the sky? Peter Baez. Peter Baez. Peter Baez. For those of you that don't know who the voice in the sky is, it's our producer and showrunner, Roger. So thank you, voice in the sky, for correcting me on my mistake. Yes, I was about to look up, but there's no need. But all the credit in the world to them. But and you know what? The other dude that stepped up huge tonight, after a little bit of a scrutiny, if you will, was Jock Peterson. Jock Peterson going out there and getting that ball there. He's not known for his defensive acumen, if you will, but him doing that, I think, was huge and was able to kind of get everything kind of okay, this is normalcy again. And for me, again, the MVP of the game today, there's always that player of the game. It's Mookie Betts. Mookie getting it done, getting it going there on the top of the lineup. We've talked about it for the last couple of days that he definitely needed to get something going, and he had the 1 walk, the 1 hit, and was definitely grinding it out on defense. It's I think it's clicking together at the right time, if you will.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we said this the other night on the show. We needed Beeler to give us innings, which he did. And I talked about this before, and that is, I think you also need a little luck in the playoffs in the postseason. And he got some luck because as good as he was today, he also was getting hit hard. But that ball was going either right at people or the ball was going foul. So I think it's nice to see that maybe things are starting to go the Dodgers' way. The Dodgers are the ones starting to get the breaks. And what had we talked about in the series? We had talked about, applying pressure and seeing how the Braves handle that pressure. Let's see if the Braves start making mistakes. The last two games, we've seen the Ozuna base running play and then the Ozzie Albies play today with the ground ball to first where the ball went out of Muncie's glove, but Albies had no clue of that and turned towards second, and Beeler was able to tag him out. So it's those kind of things where, at the beginning of the series, I felt like the Braves' aggression was really, playing in their hands. Now you're seeing the Dodgers, starting to take advantage of those breaks, and it's good to see. But big ups to everyone. But Beeler was huge. Beeler going 6 innings was something. And you mentioned also something about Pedro Baez that I want to address real quick. Yes, he bounced back and he's had 2 good outings. One of those things that I want to address is Dave Roberts. Now, if anybody was on Twitter or anybody, had a phone, I'm sure they got blown up. When they pulled Beeler, Dave Roberts was getting crucified. Why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? Well, later on, we found that information, and Alonso will drop that knowledge. But Roberts was getting crucified. And I know it's easy to blame Roberts in everything in this series, but one thing we also need to give Roberts credit for, that first outing that Baez had in this series, that rough inning that he had in the 5th inning, right after that, Roberts went up to him and talked to him, gave him a hug and said, hey, man, we're going to need you in this series. We're going to need you in order to win this. And I think whatever, Zen Phil Jackson stuff Dave Roberts did there, it's worked because the last 2 outings, Baez has been nails, and we're going to need that.
Oh, it's 100% true. And if you're just joining us here on After the Game, Dodgers win in a nail-biter 3-1. I said last night this game was going to be close, and it lived up to the expectation that it was going to be a close, almost a pitcher's duel, if you will. And it turned out in the Dodgers' favor, and that's all you can ask for. If you're joining us on Twitter or on YouTube, by all means, anything you want to chime in with, please send us a tweet. Our Twitter handles are here on the bottom, and likewise at Dodgers Beat. If you're watching on the stream, you can always chime in on the chat. We always encourage that. But Walker Buehler coming in huge. One thing that we talked about last night was the walks with Walker Buehler, and he had no walks today. And that's what we needed from him in order to be able to contain this potent offense of the Braves, so that way they couldn't capitalize on any mistakes. And he did get into some adversity with getting those bases loaded, but he hung in there and he grinded it out. And here we are. We're talking a win for Walker today on an 89 pitch count, which he was able to be efficient, and that's exactly what you want to see from a guy like Walker. One thing as well too, it's been reported, and sources are saying that he has 2 blisters on a finger. So I believe that is in fact why they pulled Walker was pulled by Dave in that situation, because, like, to your point, they're going to need him if they advance. And obviously, if he has blister issues, he needs to give that a little bit of time to get going. It didn't seem like he was having blister issues per se, but the velocity was dipping a little bit. So I think it was more of a cautious, approach with him. They're not going full baby gloves, but if anything, they're just doing whatever they can to just get ahead of it in case they do advance. And I back that, because a part of in a 7-game series, if you potentially advance, you kind of have to be ready with some sort of a contingency. And that's why it's also been reported by Buster Only that they're not potentially going to use Clayton tomorrow unless it's in a break the glass emergency situation, because they're expecting him to start game 1 of the World Series if they advance. So if that is how in fact it's panning out to be, that it would be Clayton and Walker, I suspect, game 2, then obviously they have to be proactive so they don't run into issues with the blister. Because as you guys know, as Dodger fans, Rich Hill had those blister issues for the duration of the time that he was a Dodger. So you kind of have to be proactive as far as that goes. But and another reliever that obviously stepped up huge today that kind of got off to a little bit of a rocky start was Blake Trinan. We talked about him last night that he needed to if he got the call, he needed to step up. And even though again he got a little rocky and he gave up that run, I feel like he was able to kind of go out and do what everyone expected of him. And I know you're huge on Blake, so how did you feel of Blake's outing today?
I think what Blake did in this outing today is something that he didn't do earlier in the series, and that some other Dodger relievers didn't do earlier in the series, and that was to limit the damage. In those previous games that the Dodgers lost, those innings, and it wasn't just one run that the Braves scored, it ended up turning into a 4-run, 5-run, 6-run inning. And that's what led to the Dodgers' demise in those. So I think it was huge that Blake Trinan, was able to limit the damage there. Now, I want to talk about that inning. And I think it's also very important because I think as fans, it is always quick for us to react without knowing everything that's happening, right? Knowing that Beeler now has 2 blisters is important to know. And look, I'm not going to hide it. I was the first one that was scratching my head. I was, text messaging back with friends. I thought, okay, you let Beeler go out for that 7th inning, to start that 7th inning, because it was the bottom of the Braves lineup. And he was only at 89 pitches. If he gets in trouble, you have a quick hook and you pull him out, right? Because to me, it seemed like Markakis couldn't do anything against Beeler in that game. So I didn't have any issues with Beeler coming out to face Markakis. So, yeah, I was one of those going, I can't believe it. Here it comes. Here it comes. We're going to get snake bit in this inning because of that. So it started out in a bad way, but big ups to Blake Trinan for able to shut it down and limit the damage in that inning.
No, and he was able to contain them. And again, this is a very potent lineup. No matter how we look at it, the Braves are good top to bottom. And they, even though they had their struggles today, they still had 9 hits. They still obviously had the 1 RBI. They didn't have any walks, which is exactly what the Dodgers needed to do, is to contain those walks, because then it gives the opportunity for the Dodgers to not only try to hold the lead, but it doesn't let the Braves get anything cooking, and that's precisely what happened. And another key stat there, they had the Dodgers had 8 strikeouts against the Braves. So again, them going out there and keeping those guys in check is exactly what we needed. I have to give also the Dodgers pitching staff props, because they were able to keep Freddie to the 1 hit, and they struck him out twice. Like we talked about yesterday, they obviously pitched around him and they got him to chase, and that's exactly what the Dodgers needed to do with Freddie, to get him to chase and frustrate him a little bit. And you could definitely tell he was frustrated a little bit today, and that's kind of what you have to do. As we've talked, though, Ronald Acuna, they've for the most part been able to keep him a little quiet throughout the series, and he got something going today. So that's going to be interesting to see transitioning to tomorrow, how he does going up there. One thing that I do want to mention, according to the Twitter machine, they are not announcing a Game 7 starter on the Dodgers side yet. I find that interesting, because like I said, Buster Olney's, who reported earlier that ESPN's Buster Olney, that is, reported earlier that they're only wanting to use Clayton in a glass break situation. I mean, obviously, all options are clearly on the table, because typically they have the press conference with whoever is going to be the starter, the scheduled starter, if you will, and it was Tony Gonsolin. So that'll be interesting to see as we kind of go along here on the show. That'll be a little fluid, but again, another dude that stepped up huge today, Austin Barnes. Austin Barnes, with his 2 hits, 1 strikeout, was able to kind of go out there and be, as the voice in the sky calls him, Mini Mookie. That was fantastic to see, because that bottom half of the lineup, in my opinion, stepped up huge today, because they were able to grind out some solid at bats to give chances for them to get through that lineup, so that it would force them to kind of to make it hard, because these guys, when they're on like this, they are not easy outs. So outstanding work for them. All around, a great team win. We've talked about team losses. This was an outstanding team win that the Dodgers, I think, needed, especially going into tomorrow. I'm curious to hear your take on this, though. Obviously, with this odd pandemic year, everything's changed, right? And in this series, they're playing 7 games in a row. obviously that's come to fruition. How do you feel about the Dodgers going into that, and especially having started where we're at to this point, down 3-1, having some rough losses, if you will, some rough outings, to now be at this point?
Look, I'm feeling good. I think right now things are as good as they can be going into a game 7 for the Dodgers. You have everybody available. That's it, with the exception of Kershaw. And honestly, I don't know if I want to see Kershaw in that game tomorrow. But you have Gonsolin, you have Urias, you have Dustin May. You know, these are guys that if we can get 1 or 2 innings out of it, we're going to have to piece this whole game together. And this is, piggybacking on your comment about a team win, this is what it's going to take tomorrow. It's going to take the bullpen. I mean, I'm expecting that we're going to see maybe 8 or 9 guys tomorrow. Maybe it's going to be 1 inning. I'm sure Roberts is going to have a very quick hook tomorrow. But it's fascinating to see because it was a 3-1 series. Are the Braves now starting to feel it? Are they starting to grip? I will say this. The way this game started, I have to give large kudos to Max Fried. For Fried to go 7 after that way that game started, I think that was huge for the Braves. Because I thought after that first inning, I was like, this is great. We're going to get into that Braves bullpen. We're going to go ahead and start wearing down the Braves bullpen. And then in game 7, you don't know what happens if that bullpen is tired. And plus, I think the figures were today. I mean, not that Dodgers bullpen has been that much more impressive than the Braves, but the Dodgers bullpen in the series is over 6. The Braves bullpen in the series is over 7. So I think Fried did something huge. And that is something that is concerning to me because this is now the second time in the series where the Dodgers look red hot for 1 inning and then the offense just disappears. The bats just go cold. So I really hope that's not something that we see tomorrow in game 7. I think this is, I prefer these kind of baseball games, pitchers duels, the 2-1s, the 3-2s. But it almost feels like we just have to score as many runs as we can. We have to just, because that Braves offense is good and you don't know when, they're going to erupt. I mean, if Mookie doesn't make that catch, who knows? That's a double, that's a triple, and who knows? And this is stuff that we've been talking about. It always seems like in this series that the Dodgers have had one of those innings that just everything, the wheels fall off the wagon and it just ends up being a mess. Today, the Dodgers were able to stop that and prevent that from happening. And I'm hoping that's what we see tomorrow.
Well, and it's going to be interesting to see going into tomorrow as well. Obviously, it could be, Dave is not announcing a Game 7 starter officially, if you will, because like you said, they might have him go 1 inning, 1.2, like how they did with Dustin. They have all that depth. And again, to your point as well, Ian Fried had himself a hell of an outing. All things considered, that the wheels could have fell off pretty quickly. Max Fried, I'm sorry. But he also was tipping his curveball a little bit, and that's the ball that Corey Seager took deep. He was opening his arm slot a little bit, and the Dodgers for sure saw that. If I'm seeing it on TV, they for sure saw it, and that's the ball that he took yard. And it's one of those things where it's interesting to kind of see, this is the second time the Dodgers have seen him. And obviously tomorrow, Ian Anderson is who apparently is going to be going for the Braves. And I apologize if I keep looking at my phone and keep getting text messages. And there's one that I'm waiting on for seeing if anyone knows anything going on with the starting situation. But if, as far as them tomorrow with Ian, this will also be their second go around with Ian. And I'm curious to see how the Dodgers respond to that as well with them seeing him for the second time. And all credit in the world, like you said, to Max, keeping the damage, if you will, to a minimum and taking one for the team. It was interesting to see, though, in real time, Max making those adjustments by kind of walking off the mound and walking around and just trying to reset the cobwebs a little bit, if you will, and just kind of remember and trust his stuff. In comparison, we talked about Dustin May, where Dustin didn't really – you can definitely tell that he wasn't trusting his stuff. He wasn't feeling it, wasn't trusting it. So it's interesting to see the two young guys that, in contrast from one to the other, less than 24 hours, going out there and making the adjustment in real time. Because Matt, I don't know what the deal was with Max as far as the slot goes. Maybe he was just trying to get a little bit more over the top action on that curveball. But it's one of those things where, it's going to be interesting to see tomorrow how they react with them seeing Ian for the second time. And then I'm expecting the Dodgers to come out aggressive again, like today, where they were able to get everything kind of going and firing on all cylinders in the first inning. I'm just hoping that they don't take the gas off of the pedal, because that adrenaline's going to be flowing, and obviously they're going to be playing with emotion, and it's a winner take all, and that's just where we're at. And to be honest, all things considered, how the series started to where we're at now, this is the best case scenario for the Dodgers. Because all along they've talked about it, they're banking on the depth. And tomorrow, I think that does work in their favor as far as the depth goes, because like you said, the Braves bullpen has been suspect. Once they get past those starters, that's when the Dodgers have done damage. And as you've seen in the 7th, 8th, and 9th, when the Dodgers have had those little rallies, if you will, going that carry over into the next day, that's going to be interesting to see how the Dodgers, don't keep that, they keep that momentum going into tomorrow. I'm curious to hear your take, though. If let's say Tony doesn't go. Let's just say they throw a curveball at us and they decide to go someone else. Who do you think would get that call?
It's really tough, because part of me feels like they would go to an opener and then go to Urias. The thing, though, that makes me hesitant about that is that Urias threw 100 pitches. And there was something that I saw on Twitter from former Major Leaguer Dan Herron. And that was, this is the second time the Dodgers saw Max Fried in 5 days. And this is, I think, one of the things that adds to the frustration with the Dodgers in the postseason. I do think that this is a team, because of their depth, that they are built for the regular season. And in the short season series, in a postseason, they do get exposed because of the familiarity that takes place in a series. These guys are professional hitters, so they start seeing a pitcher, and you illustrated beautifully with Max Fried. The Dodgers were smart enough to pick up that with his release point and pick up the curveballs. So are the Braves that good where they're going to start picking up adjustments with the pitchers that they're going to see again in a short amount of time? So I don't know who you would pick to start the game, only because the ones that I feel the most faith in are the ones I want to save for the end of the game, right? Brusdar, Victor Gonzalez, right? So could you see maybe Dylan Floro open the game, just pitch 1 inning? Could we see Kolarek pitch that first inning just in order to pitch to Freeman? But then again, Kolarek hasn't looked very good in the series. So do you want to, especially since it's going to be the first inning, the Braves are going to be leading off. I really don't know. I mean, I don't know how much you can. I don't know if you can get more than an inning out of Julio because of his pitch count. So is it Dustin May? I mean, is it? Gonsolin admitted, too, that he was tired going into that 5th inning. So, again, I don't know how much he has left in the tank. And that's why I don't think we're going to see anybody tomorrow for more than 2 innings.
And I agree. I think if based on what they're kind of hinting at, if you will, here in the post-game stuff on their end, I think Tony's going to go 2 innings max. I don't see him going more than 2 innings. I think he would be the opener. And then from there, it just kind of depends on the situation. I did find it interesting that, and I believe it was in the in-game interview where they like Smoltz and Buck were talking about it, that Dave wanted to stay away from Brusdar today. And I found that a little bit of interesting as far as like a tell goes, because I think they are indicating that they're going to have a bullpen game of sorts going into tomorrow, and kind of want to have all hands on deck, which obviously for the Dodgers, if you have all of your horses that are ready to go, they didn't throw an excessive amount of pitches, which they didn't. Blake Trinan didn't throw a crazy amount of pitches, nor did Pedro Baez, and Kenley didn't throw a crazy amount of pitches. So it's kind of the best case scenario as well for the Dodgers, even though they obviously, the Braves kind of got lucky that Max was able to go what he did and contain the damage, if you will. But for for the Dodgers, in the same breath, they were able to contain the damage and minimize their bullets that are used going into tomorrow, which is the best case scenario for the Dodgers. So I'm curious to see though how that goes and what kind of their, obviously they're gonna have their plan as far as who they, in an ideal situation, who they're going to go to. But I think tomorrow for sure is going to be more of a, hey, these are our matchups. And that's the only thing that makes me nervous, is because as you've seen in the past historically, when they go to those matchups, it doesn't tend to fare well in the Dodgers' favor. So I hope they truly stick to it more in the sense of, the feel, if you will, instead of focusing on the analytics, because regardless tomorrow, it's either win or go home. And that's the end all be all. That's not going to change regardless. But if I'm kind of curious to hear your takes on it here. If you're watching us, please chime in on who you think would either be the opener or the starter. Excuse me. Out of everyone that's kind of available, I'm kind of curious to hear the Dodger fans' take on who they might think might start. As far as the opener goes. And but looking ahead to tomorrow, I think they're going to probably go with this same lineup tomorrow that we saw today. It wouldn't surprise me, in part because obviously Chris Taylor is ailing a little bit, and he, we didn't see him today, so that's not a bad thing either. It's given him a little bit of rest. We don't know the full circumstances of that ankle injury that he had, but from the way that it looks like he rolled the ankle. As far as tomorrow goes, do you foresee any major changes happening to that lineup?
Well, of course, the fact that Ian Anderson is pitching tomorrow and is a right-hander, I'm sure the Dodgers are going to look to load up with lefties. So does that mean that we're going to have Jock in left? Does that mean that we're going to see Edwin Rios? And this is something that you have discussed off the air, and that is how Edwin Rios really doesn't feel comfortable pitch hitting or hasn't had much success this season pitch hitting. So would you be better off having Rios as the DH and Jock out in left field? Rios did have a pinch hit appearance today and didn't seem to do much with it. So I do expect to see more left-handers in there. So I don't think we're going to have the exact lineup. But again, it's a Game 7. So it's going to be nuts. And the thing that I'm going to be looking at the most is how do the Braves deal with that Game 7 energy? Because, and I get it, it's different. When you're losing, you really don't have that much to cheer about. But the Braves dugout hasn't been that crazy the last 2 games. So I think if things start going for them and then you start seeing that dugout going crazy, where they're jumping out of the dugout on a single, do the Braves feed off of that? And if that's what they feed off of, maybe we got to make sure that we don't let the Braves get off early in this game.
No, and I agree. I think it's a point that we were going to get to here is the Braves. They've been pretty ecstatic the last few games, and up until yesterday and today, definitely not the same energy and the vibe coming from that Braves dugout. They've been able to kind of keep them in check, if you will, and which is another huge thing that the Dodgers needed to do. Obviously, Walker Buehler's performance, this is, the 5th start when he's kind of been in those big game situations, if you will, where he's come out and delivered. And obviously the Braves knew that going into this because stats are everywhere. Game 163, the NLDS against the Brewers in 18, the NLCS in 18. It's one of those things where these guys showed up, and he showed up and then some. That's why I'm kind of curious to see tomorrow who that starter ends up being, because they very easily, the momentum is obviously going to carry in there for the Dodgers going into tomorrow. And then as far as kind of the stars aligning for the Dodgers as well, we have Joe Davis on the call tomorrow because Buck is doing football. And then from there, this is kind of the best case scenario for the Dodgers, because everything that they've hinted at as far as, from the start of the series to now as to why they weren't panicking was they were banking on their youth and their depth. And here we are. We're in that situation where, like you said, the best thing that happens in sports is a Game 7 of any kind, right? I do want to point out one thing. A former manager, pointed something out yesterday about the Rays and the Astros series that's also kind of important to indicate here. The Rays had the opportunity to close out the series, right? And they were up, 3-0, and here we are now where the Astros have forced the Game 7. It's a similar situation with the Braves. They've had an opportunity to close out the Dodgers, and the Dodgers have just, they've stuck to the plan, if you will. And we talked about that last night where Dave was talking about that, sticking to the plan. He went out and said essentially the same thing where the Rays can't necessarily, oh, woe is me, as far as getting into being forced into a Game 7 because they deserve that because they didn't close out. So I'm curious to see how the Braves kind of respond to that because, like you said, and we've said it throughout this series, the Braves hadn't really had their backs up against the wall. Now they officially have their backs up against the wall. All the pressure in the world truly is now on the Braves. And I think it was on them today, and I think it's obviously going to be on them tomorrow because they were up 3-1, and then now it's a 3-3 series, winner take all, and these Braves really haven't been put in that situation. The Dodgers in some cases they have. They've been here before. Obviously, some of these guys were there in 17 when the series went 7. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of the looseness, if you will, of the Dodgers. Because even today they were pretty loose. When the game started. So it's the momentum is for sure swinging in the direction of the Dodgers, and obviously with them getting that hot start, getting that solid start from Walker Beeler is going to be huge. Going into tomorrow. As far as the lefty that you expect to kind of stand out tomorrow against Ian, who do you think that lefty is going to be?
I have to go with playoff Jock, because I think Cody actually did look a little better today. It just doesn't seem like the results are there for him. Like he really doesn't have anything to show for it. But that being said, I want to use Mookie as the example. Mookie has not had a great offensive series, but Mookie has played a pivotal role in this series because of his defense. So all credit to Mookie not letting it get into his head. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe something like that happens with Bellinger. He's been playing good defense out there. He's been doing all those things. That maybe he'll get rewarded by coming up with a big offensive day. Because piggybacking on what you said about the momentum, it does seem like everything changed from the moment that catch in Game 5 that Mookie made, and then they were able to double up Ozuna on the leaving early from third. It seemed like the Dodgers were on the ropes in that game. And going back to what you were saying, like when you have an opportunity to put a team away, you need to put them away because you are now in the National League Championship Series. Like the Braves only have 3 playoff losses in the whole postseason. Those 3 playoff losses come at the hands of the Dodgers. So this is the first time that they're facing adversity. The Dodgers faced adversity early in the series, and as I mentioned to you before, this team feels different. I don't know if Dodger teams in the past would have come back from this 3-1 deficit, especially the way things are going, but it does seem that everything turned there. I say Jock only because I think, Jock just has a history of delivering in the postseason, which Cody doesn't. But I secretly I am rooting for Cody just because he hasn't let his performance at the plate affect him on the field. And I think that is a sign of a true professional there.
Well, and defensively, he showed up today huge.
Yeah.
He had a great defensive game, and he's grinding out his at-bats and definitely being more patient. And that's the adjustment that you want to see going into a series. I want to point out a stat that I just had sent to me. When an LCS team, AL or National League, featuring a 3-1 lead is pushed to a Game 7, the team that faced the 3-1 deficit has won Game 7 in 7 of 9 instances before tonight's situation where we're at here in the ALCS as well. That's an interesting stat, because of where we're at now, how it started to where we are now. I feel like, though, obviously stats are stats, right? And I'm not the most overly superstitious person. I, as a former baseball player myself, am a creature of habit with really stupid things like most baseball players are. Freddie Freeman, perfect example, has worn the same damn shirt since 2010, same undershirt that is. So I mean, I get it. I did the same thing. I did similar things. So I get it. But I think what's key to kind of see here as far as what's going is I think everything is just clicking at the right time for the Dodgers. And obviously, I'm not trying to jinx anything by any stretch, but I think looking ahead to tomorrow, that's what's going to be the key because the Braves, for me, were they definitely were hanging their head a little bit is when they had those bases loaded and Walker grinded back and was able to get them out because easily I'm sure the Braves themselves were wanting to get at least a run there and they
Yeah.
couldn't do that, and that's something that the Dodgers really hadn't been able to preserve going into where we're at. And the other thing to take away from that bases loaded situation, Walker didn't walk anybody. For me, that's huge for your confidence as a pitcher because if you get the bases loaded on walks or if you get them loaded on, something weird, a pass ball in that situation, because that's the sort of stuff that kind of eats at you in the back of your mind. Walker was able to kind of masterfully put on a clinic to show you how to get through those jams. And that's what the Dodgers needed to see because truthfully, that's something the Dodgers really hadn't seen this series from their starters. The Braves had capitalized on those mistakes. And for the first time in the series, I think the Dodgers were able to just say, nah, not today. We're going to go out here and this is what needs to be done. So that's why I think after yesterday to today, that's why I think it's important that the mindset be pointed out because this is a different team. And like you said, I think, teams from years past, the ghost of Dodgers past would have definitely reacted differently to this level of adversity. And I don't think they would have been able to overcome it, and get to this point. And that's why I think the Dodgers have not only a puncher's chance tomorrow, it's going to be a close game, I think. And I think it's going to be a lot like today, the classic game where it's a couple runs of a deficit. And I think the key to tomorrow is going to be, once again, obviously containing Freddie Freeman, obviously containing Marcell Ozuna, and any time that they get in those adverse situations where they might have a couple guys in position to score, it's going to be interesting to see how the Dodgers kind of react with that adversity because up until the Braves had scored, the Braves were 0-14 with runners in scoring position in the series. So the Dodgers obviously, and the Dodgers know that. The Dodgers know those damn stats. It's just a matter of them being able to contain the Braves, not give up any home runs, and if they do give up home runs, kind of like we said with Kershaw, keep them to solos, and then from there, just go out there and play their game. Because right now, Corey Seager is the hottest dude on the planet.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to stop that dude, and it's a matter of riding that wave of momentum going into tomorrow. If you were to make a prediction on tomorrow's outcome, what would it be?
Well, at the beginning of the series, I said Dodgers in 7. I'm predicting the Dodgers are going to win tomorrow. I do think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be very similar to the way today's game played out because they have to make it stressful. But at the same time, I'm also prepared to have our hearts broken in the most horrific way possible. I do think the Dodgers are going to win. But here, let me ask you this. If by chance the Dodgers don't win, do you feel better that the series went 7 as opposed to them getting eliminated in 5? Does it change your overall, or, I mean, obviously it's still going to be a disappointment if they don't get to the World Series. But the fact that they were able to come back from 3-1, make this a 7-game series, does that change anything about how this series is played out?
Yes, I think it does in the sense that it shows that they have the ability to grind it out. And I think that's something that the Dodgers have needed, because I feel like, kind of piggybacking on what we talked about yesterday with Wood saying the comments that he made about that they have a hard time kind of getting motivated, especially in the postseason because they've been here so much. I think that's going to be important to the Dodgers going forward because obviously there's going to be some changes that are made to this roster going forward. There's going to be some guys that we're probably not going to come back, and they just have to be able to input guys that are able to understand the importance of grinding out, because you might get in a dogfight like they are in this current series, right? And everyone around them, I mean, that's the thing, is everyone around them is getting better. The show pods,
Yeah.
they're getting better. Obviously the Braves are better. The creme de la creme of the National League is getting better. The Marlins are getting better. So I mean, it's a matter of now it's okay. If everyone is, if it's LA versus the world, which has kind of been that mantra for however many years, that's cool and all. How do we overcome it and defeat the world, if you will? And I think that's what's going to be the big takeaway for these guys, is especially with all the adversity this year. Obviously, the pandemic season, injuries, Kenley Jansen. There are so many things that have gone into place, but somehow, some way, they were able to figure it out to get to this point. And that would be the best example to show to younger guys that, hey, you're going to come across adversity. You have to overcome it, because then when you do, when the odds are working in your favor, if you will, a little bit of luck and grinding it out, you force game sevens. And I do think that the Dodgers win a close one tomorrow. I just think that bullpen right now is doing what it needs to do, and it's firing on all the right cylinders. And I think that's going to be the huge advantage. And likewise, I'm expecting a big day from Jock Peterson. Secretly I am still rooting for Cody, but I think Cody's going to have a big defensive day, and a part of that is he's going to ride that defensive wave that he rode today. He definitely didn't take any plays off, and that was good to see. But what I'm curious to see, though, is for sure if Edwin Rios is in that lineup at DH. They're going to keep obviously riding that hot hand of Justin Turner, and all signs indicate that that's the way that they're going to go. But again, like you said, it's game 7. So anything can happen. They very easily could say, hey, we were going to go all lefties, but nah, we're just going to ride the hot hand of all these bats that we currently have, and we'll ride the hands that we have. Another dude that I would actually like to have, I would like to see have another huge day, is Max Muncie. Max has for sure been grinding out his at-bats. Today he struck out twice, he had a hit, and he had the run. But I think Max is on the cusp, if you will, of being the Max that we all know he can be, and it doesn't hurt that he's left-handed. So it's going to be an interesting game. It's going to be a nail biter, and it's for sure going to be stressful. As you and I both know, the voice in the sky is going to always remind us of how stressful these games are. But you know what? This is what we wanted. We wanted 7 games. We wanted the Dodgers to do anything and everything that they can to advance, and I think they've put themselves in a solid position to be able to do just that tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean,
what was that? Already?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
The guy that just came out of nowhere and just hits all these home runs. Look, here's the thing. I mean, I'm trying to be as positive as possible. And I think maybe it's just because I'm trying to balance off the energy that Roger gives. But here's the thing. I think tomorrow's Game 7 is actually going to be harder for the fans than it is going to be for the players. Because I think those guys out there playing, they're not carrying with them the ghosts of former Dodger teams like the fans are. I think the fans are just waiting for those heartbreaking moments. When is it going to happen? And the thing is yes, there is a part of me that just feels like they're going to pull it off tomorrow. But there's also a huge part of me that is very concerned. I think they had the right guy on the mound tonight, and that was Beeler. That kid seems to show no fear. Even if he's not pitching well, he's a fighter. And he was the right guy that they had in 2018 in that Game 7 for the NLCS. So I'm a little concerned that going into tomorrow, we don't have that fearless person that's going to start off the game. And maybe it's because, it's going to be a bullpen game. But how are the Dodgers also going to, react to the fact that this is it? This either is going to be the last game of our season, or we're going to the World Series. And maybe these young kids are just too ignorant to know any better, and they bounce back. Maybe Dustin May gives us 2 brilliant innings, that carries us through. It's one of those things where I think it's just going to be a lot worse for the fans than it is going to be for the players.
And you know what? And one thing as we start to wrap this, interestingly enough, the other guy that I'm expecting to have a big day, if he starts it out, is Tony Gonsolin. The reason that I think that is a part of why I think he was gassed was obviously he hadn't thrown in a few days now, or in a few weeks rather. Now he's had the opportunity to go out there and throw. He's what every pitcher wants to do is be in a real situation, right? And he all things considered, Tony had a pretty good outing. Obviously they ran into the issues they ran into as far as the adversity went, but all things considered, his outing was good. If you can get 2 innings like that, and if you can get no walks again from this entire start, however it ends up going, if it's a bullpen game, for me, that's going to be the key part as far as getting those Braves contained. Because obviously, like we talked about, and we've talked about it off air, the Dodgers have been so hot and cold that is concerning. Yeah. It's very incredibly concerning. Today was another example of that. The first inning they went out and they got it going, but then after that it simmered down. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Dodgers can obviously keep those first inning heroics going. Outstanding. Go out there and get 3 or 4 runs, and you're good. From there, if the bullpen and the staff can do their job, which is don't let Freddie hit, don't let Ozzie hit, don't walk anybody, and you are able to kind of contain everybody else, to me, that has to be the game plan. And I wish I could be a fly on the wall for both the hitters and the pitchers meetings going into tomorrow, just because I would want to hear what the strategy is going to be, especially against Freddie. And what Blake did today against Freddie, that was outstanding. I was nervous, because when Blake was kind of, when Pryor came out and they were talking a little bit, for me, I was like, oh no, that's bad.
Yeah.
Because Mark Pryor doesn't really make mound visits. So he was able to kind of come back and grind it out with him, and that's precisely what you need. And again, I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a complete game win again, just like today, and then we're off to the World Series. I am curious to hear your take, though. What do you think is going to happen in Game 7 now that we know that the Rays are up 2-0?
In Game 7 of the Rays-Astros?
Yeah.
Look, there is just a part of me, because this is 2020, and I would like to believe that we are on the precipice of making some sort of karmic change. The Astros are going to win tonight, and the Dodgers are going to win tomorrow, and we're going to have a rematch of that 2017 World Series, and the Dodgers will get their revenge. There's just a part of me that feels like that's the best story. Going back to that Lakers championship, and with Kobe passing away this year, in the first round of that series, Kobe when he won his first championship without Shaq in 2009, in the first round, he beat the Blazers. In the second round, he beat the Rockets, and he ended up beating Orlando. The Lakers beat the Blazers in the first round this year. They then beat the Rockets in the second round, and they won their championship in Orlando. So I would love to believe that there is something or organic happening here from 1988, and that the Dodgers are just going to right a lot of wrongs and make it up for all those fans of 32 years that have been waiting to raise another championship. So I think the Astros are going to come back. I also think the Astros are going to come back because I think the Rays have misplayed their bullpen in this series. They kind of, I think, went for the kill, which you can't blame them. But I think now it's backfired on them. So I don't know. I just have a feeling. And if the Astros lose, it's fine. It's a win-win situation for me. If they lose, whatever, I don't care. The most important thing is that the Dodgers end up winning tomorrow.
Well, and I haven't said it on here because I don't want to jinx anything, but I still believe it that whoever wins the NLCS is going to win the World Series. I think both of those teams are better than the 2 remaining contenders in the American League. The other caveat is I agree with you. I definitely think there's something feels different with this Dodgers team than I even felt 3 days ago. It's definitely different than 17. It's definitely different than 18 when they played the Red Sox. I don't want to necessarily go out on this limb and say something crazy like they're a team of destiny, but something feels different. And I think, like I said, my prediction is they win tomorrow, and I do think the Astros will win because, as we've seen in the last couple of games, the Rays have gone up early, and the Astros come back and just make them pay.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to happen again today. Lance McCullers has been pitching lights out, even with him giving these 2 home runs up, or not 2 home runs, 1 home run, I think it was. I'm not watching, so I apologize. But with McCullers going out and doing what he does, I'm expecting him kind of be able to contain the damage. And again, I expect the Astros to win, and I hope Joe Kelly throws at them again in the World Series. Because it's obviously the task at hand is that, but they kind of have to be reminded, like, hey, I know what you did last summer, so we can't forget about that, and then they're going to go out and, like you said, ultimately get the revenge, which would be the ultimate revenge, and most importantly, I'm just tired of Carlos Correa talking.
Exactly. Wait. You brought up Joe Kelly. So real quick, because I don't want to lose track of it. Perhaps the person that gave the best motivational speech, the one that lit the fire under the Dodgers' butts, was Joe Kelly's son, Knox Kelly. For those of you who have not seen that video, Dodgers Beat went ahead and shared it. But Joe Kelly's son basically said, "We didn't come down here to lose. We came down here to win." So hopefully that's what the Dodgers do tomorrow.
And I hope so too. Honestly, I think there's something that feels different about this team right now than what it was feeling like even a couple of days ago. They haven't. The thing that I noticed is they haven't rang the alarm bells at all, and that's one thing to kind of take away from them understanding the moment. And I think that's key, especially going into a Game 7, because if you're panicking, then it's going to be interesting to see. And Braves Twitter is interesting. I watch some of the things as far as what they say. And by the way, real quick, something that was just said by Dave Roberts. Dave Roberts just said that he'll check with Kershaw tomorrow before he deciding if he can pitch in relief.
No, why even put that out in the guy just pitched, it hasn't even been 2 days since the guy pitched, and you're already,
However, he also said that there's a good chance the Gonsolin will take down a big portion of the Game 7 innings. So maybe they go out with an opener, whoever that is, and then after that they give it to Gonsolin, and they ride him until the 7th inning, and then they go to the bullpen. I could see them doing that.
I find that interesting that they seem to be relying more on Gonsolin than Urias, and Urias has 1 day rest more than Gonsolin. How many pitches did Gonsolin end up throwing in that game?
I think it was 85.
And then Urias threw 100. So I don't know. I just find that rationale very interesting because of the fact that, Gonsolin hasn't been pitching that much, and you could see that he was running out of gas. But then again, I don't think you're going to need him for a lot of innings tomorrow because I think you're gonna spread the wealth. I don't see anybody going more than 2 innings tomorrow unless they are truly dominant and they're just plowing through that lineup.
So I think, and hear me out, this is just a hot take. This isn't me knowing anything about anything. It's just a hot take. I think that they're trying to save Urias for the World Series. And I think that he might be the Game 3 guy if they make it to the World Series, or even Game 2 if they're concerned about Walker's blisters. Right. Because if you think about it, in the traditional sense, especially against these Astros, if that is, or both teams really, both of those guys, they may not be able to bang with the Dodgers or the Braves, guy for guy, but the thing that both of those teams have in common is they both grind out their at bats. So you can't necessarily have a bullpen game against either of those two teams, because of that factor of how they grind out their at bats. So, and they're both defensively good teams, right? So you kind of have to play the advantage where you can. And and I've always believed if you go into a World Series with 3 starters, and 3 quality starters, you're just giving yourself that much more of a chance to win, right, even if it's a long series. So that's kind of the vibe that I've gathered. I don't know anything definitively. That's just me talking out of my ass. But, if I were to guess, that's what it would be, that it's, they want to go. I mean, they've already made it clear they're thinking of going Clayton game 1. So then that means either Walker or Julio would go game 2. And if you are in the enviable position of potentially having 4 starters in a World Series that you could throw out there, then Gonsolin would be the 4th guy, I think.
Yeah.
And the reason I also think that too, that it isn't Dustin in that situation, Dustin didn't look like he trusts his stuff, and they're on record saying that they're not sure if Dustin trusts his stuff. So to me, it's one of those where it's like, I can't put that guy out there in a situation like the World Series yet, especially if they're going against a high-powered offense of either the Rays or the Astros. And that's why I think tomorrow is when we would probably see Dustin May, see if he still is the rubber band arm that they kind of say that he is, and getting it going. So I mean, that's looking ahead, several days. But obviously, when you play in a game 7, not only are you managing today in game 6 for a game 7, but you're also with the contingency of, okay, if we advance, then we have to also have ourselves in the best position to succeed if we advance. Right. And so that's going to be interesting to see as far as how that plays out. But I mean, Braves Twitter is kind of all over the place too. I kind of noticed that they're just as pessimistic as we are as a fan base. But it's going to be interesting to see how if they check in with Kershaw like they're saying. I don't know if that's gamesmanship, and Dave isn't this kind of guy to do the gamesmanship thing publicly. If they go out and go with Kershaw at some point when he comes into the game.
Look, but this, to me, that sounds a lot, and I think you and I have had this conversation off the air about this, but it does feel like they are so desperate to try to rewrite his postseason story, and put him in a situation where he comes to save the day, and it just backfires and it makes it worse. I mean, the guy literally, he pitched game 4. If you have other people that are in a better position that would be more successful to pitch, I guess maybe it's due diligence, and you just do need to see if he's going to be available. But I've just seen that movie too many times, and I know how it ends, that it just scares me in a game 7.
No, and I agree. I mean, it's concerning. Obviously they're going to look at the advantageous situation with the Braves too, of Markakis and Riley, I think, were 1 for 10, something like that, 1 for 9. And, they that's certain stats like that always stand out in those stat sheets that they look at. And I'm curious to see, like I was saying, this is the one thing that I have a little bit of a beef with sabermetrics, is they don't necessarily go for the field. They look at the matchups. And I'm curious to see who they think Kershaw would match up best against, especially in those high leverage situations, going into a clinching game, an elimination game, however you want to look at it, right? And especially with the likes of that top of the Braves lineup, in my opinion, it's kind of a coin flip as far as who's the better matchup guy, as far as Tony or Kershaw or even May goes. But because all things considered, out of those 3 guys, the thing that's the most concerning is May, because of the counts they got into. Even though Kershaw struggled a little bit, he didn't have his A+ stuff. He still, all things considered, he kept the Dodgers in the game and didn't really have bad counts. He was able to kind of keep them in play, and those guys were able to get low into the count. Whereas Dustin didn't really have that component going in his game when he threw the other night, and that's concerning. So it's going to be interesting to see. Like you said, I think some of it is diligence. They want to just, hey, all hands on deck. Usually means everyone except whoever they think the next game starter is. And I mean, I read you what Dave said. So I mean, it sounds like they're probably going to have everyone, but he hasn't said it as far as I can see. As far as kind of the notes that are coming out of the presser, I haven't seen anything about Julio.
Wow, that's surprising.
Yeah, and nothing. I mean, I don't know if anyone asked him about it. But that's going to be interesting to see. But I mean, hey, whoever, if you're watching the show and you're the person that sacrificed the chicken for us, thank you. Thank you, because now we have Joe Davis calling the game tomorrow. We're in a game 7. And in a game 7 where I read the stat earlier, the stat sounds like it might benefit us. But I mean, again, everything kind of goes out the window because everything that you've talked about up until now, no one gives a damn, because if you don't execute tomorrow, then we go home. So it's going to be interesting to see. We'll be here. You know, we've talked about live streaming a game and being on the internet with you guys. Maybe if we're all up for it, maybe we could do that tomorrow, just so we could all stress cry.
I don't know. Live streaming a game with Roger, I think, might put me in the hospital. I think that anxiety that's going to be coming off the screen watching Roger pace around his living room, I don't know if I could handle that.
I at some point I feel a little bad for giving shit to Roger on the in our messages, but at the same time I'm just like, oh man, this poor guy. But I mean, he's he bleeds blue and then some. But I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, what better time than now for a game 7? Because it's what we all, in some instances, we weren't expecting to be here. If I'm honest.
No, I look. Even the most optimistic Dodger fan will have to admit that they thought this was over. You know, I mean, it's just been crazy what the Astros have been doing in the other series. It's crazy, right? I mean, for teams to do this, it's just not that common. So yes, enjoy it. We got to a game 7 tomorrow night. It's either going to be a great night or we're going to have a much different after the game show tomorrow.
And hopefully we don't get to your rant yet. But if we do, we get to it. If we don't, we don't.
I don't want to give my rant because I got to tell you, it has been very therapeutic doing this with you because I feel like I've handled the losses much better than if I was by myself. If I was by myself, I think I would be the way Roger is and just be like, the world is over. I mean, the world is already burning. So, I mean, what are you going to do? But I'm definitely looking forward for tomorrow. I can't wait. And I really think the Dodgers are going to pull this off.
Well, and on the plus side, like you said, the world is burning. This is a nice distraction from the world burning.
Yes, exactly.
So for all of you that have joined us for the last few nights, thank you. And we will see you tomorrow. Please stay safe. If you're going to go out, please wear a mask, socially distance, do all that good stuff. And most importantly, sacrifice a chicken so that way we can keep this going for another few days. But until tomorrow, we will see you then.